Well, hello there, and welcome to this episode of The Terri Show. I'm so happy that you are joining me today. I want to start with a couple of questions. Are you a person who feels everything? Anyone? Raise your hand. You notice sort of even the micro changes in someone's tone or their facial expressions, and you ask yourself, what did I do? Like, what am I doing wrong that is creating this problem? Or you can't sit in a room with someone who's in pain without trying to fix it because you're so empathic. You're emotionally attuned, right? You are deeply caring. And maybe you're super exhausted, right? Because it is exhausting. So if any of that sounds familiar, this episode is for you. And listen, you're not broken, right? It's just being hypersensitive without skills. And I'm going to be handling that in today's episode. I'm going to be talking about how you might be going through the world and what you can do to make changes to be still empathic, but just not so wide open to anyone and anything. All right. Before we get started, if you happen to be new to this YouTube channel, please introduce yourself in the comments because we are a very friendly group. Also, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon because I don't want you to miss a thing. And I roll out 2 new videos per week right here on YouTube. And if you hit the bell icon, then you will get notified when my new stuff is out. And I'm doing it for you, so I would like you to be notified. All right, let's move it on into today's episode, shall we? I think we shall. So being someone, as I said at the top, that feels everything, right? I can remember being a child and noticing micro changes in the adults around me, their facial expression. I could notice it with children as well, of course, but I can literally remember seeing a shift or like sort of a darkness come over someone's eyes and be like, okay, what do I need to do to shift that back into them being happy? And this is the plight of an empath. Because here's the thing. We all know empathy is a gift. It actually is. But without boundaries, it really does become a heavy burden. Because without that discernment, it's just exhausting. So being an empath isn't the problem, right? The problem is that you were never taught to have boundaries with this incredible gift. As I always say about being an empath, this could be your superpower, right? This is amazing to be dialed into other people. It's like you know this secret language when you can understand other people's emotions, when you feel other people's emotions. But it is a burden unless you know how to set appropriate boundaries. Because empathy should not lead to emotional burnout, resentment, or self-abandonment, but it does, right? It really does, because although empathy is powerful and we know this, without boundaries, it actually turns out to be emotional neglect, because that's sort of the fallout of what happens when we're feeling so empathic towards other people and so concerned about what's happening with them, right? What ends up happening with us is that usually self-neglect gets kicked up. So I'm going to be focusing on emotional boundaries in this episode of The Terri Show, which is the invisible lines between what we feel and what we're responsible for and what we're allowed to protect, right, within ourselves. Because for some empaths, right, and people pleasers, which I feel like we kind of go hand in hand, the real damage isn't necessarily from saying yes to helping someone move, let's just say, but it's from saying yes to carrying the emotional state on your back for days afterwards. I always ask you guys, I'll put this in the guide for this episode, terricole.com/guide, who drains you and who replenishes you? And that's what we're really talking about, because when you're an empath who's unprotected, an empath who is boundaryless, kinda, pretty much everyone drains you because you don't have the mechanism in place to not be drained. And you guys are in luck because Boundary Bootcamp season has begun. I've been talking about boundaries. I'll keep talking about boundaries because Boundary Bootcamp 2025 starts in 2 weeks. So I'll give you info for that at the end. But anyway, I'm back to talking about one of my favorite topics, which is boundaries. So let's talk about the empath and people pleaser combo, like what happens. Because many of us people who are empaths, many of you people who are empaths, are also people pleasers. And here's why. Why? There's a reason, right? You guys, everything that we do makes sense, right? Like there is an adaptive functioning in our brains and our emotional intelligence, where in childhood, we learned if we managed other people's moods, we could stay safe. We all had different roles to play in our family system. So if you were rewarded as a kid for being low maintenance, right, for being agreeable or intuitive, let's just say even that, like doing things before even being asked, right, because you're dialed in to the grown-ups and into your surroundings, we just get used to doing that. And then you grow up to be an adult who is continuing to be low maintenance, right? One of my friends, Vienna Farron, talks about in her book, The Origins of You, that she was a child without needs because she didn't have parents who could fulfill her needs, and that she then grew up to be a woman without needs. And of course, both of those things are false, and she goes on to talk about it in the book. Obviously, we all have needs, but when you learn early on that to stay out of the way, to be of service, that this will either get you positive feedback or at least lessen the negative feedback that you may be getting in your childhood home. I mean, people-pleasing becomes a survival strategy, right? If I keep everyone happy, I won't get hurt. If I'm part of the solution, then I won't be in trouble or I won't be hurt by the adults in my life. But I think we really have to think about what happens when empathy has no boundaries. So, well, if we look at it from an emotional standpoint, we become emotionally entangled with the people in our lives, which is not the same as having emotional connections, right? Being entangled or being enmeshed, that is when empathy has no boundaries. So it's like you are merging with the people in your life. And, as trite as it sounds, it's hard for you to know where you end and the other person begins, right? And this is just like boundaries 101, is that we have to know where we end and other people begin. But when you have empathy without boundaries, or you grew up that way in an enmeshed family system, whether it was chaotic, whether it was because there was addiction, whether it was because there was abuse, we really just were doing whatever we had to do in childhood to survive. But what else happens when empathy has no boundaries? You absorb the energy that isn't yours, right? And then you act from the other person's pain, not really your own intuition. So it gets so confusing and complicated when we are empaths without good boundaries, because you literally don't know whose feelings are whose. Make sense? And then you feel hyper-responsible for everyone's emotional state. Even if you intellectually know that can't be true, if this was planted in childhood, it is an automatic reaction and response. So learning about boundaries when you're an empath is one of the most empowering things you can do. It will literally change your life. If you become a boundary boss, and obviously I can walk you through that, Boundary Bootcamp starts in 2 weeks, it will change your life, because that's one thing that most of us, if we were raised the way that I'm describing, we were not allowed to have boundaries in childhood in the way that I'm talking about, healthy boundaries. They just didn't exist. And again, we're all just trying to get out of here alive in childhood. Like, listen, some people had better childhoods than others. I think most of us had our fair share of challenges in our family of origin. I mean, honestly, I've been a therapist for almost 30 years. I think that's safe to say. Even in family systems that weren't like profoundly dysfunctional, there's still things that happen. that turn you into, especially empaths, that being dialed in, because again, also for women being raised in a patriarchal system, being an empath is also a way of staying safe. We're dialed into the feeling states, the facial expressions of other people. Why? As women, because we're endlessly vulnerable to being violated, to being assaulted, to being followed, to being carjacked. I mean, this is not being paranoid. This is just, it's interesting. I was talking about this with my girlfriends when we were away a couple of weeks ago about how, as women, we just sort of, especially growing up in the 70s and 80s, we just sort of accepted that this misogynistic, sexist society was just like our lot. Like, what are you going to do? You still had to. I remember I had a landlord at one of my apartments in New York City, and I was leaving after re-signing my lease, and he slapped my ass. Like, he actually slapped my ass on the way out the door. And he had sort of done me a favor, and I felt like I couldn't say anything, and I didn't. Now, I would have turned around and probably punched him in the face today, and probably with my 61-year-old ass, he probably wouldn't have smacked it now. Who knows? It's interesting as you get healthier and have better boundaries, and obviously, I'm talking about 30-something years ago, I think the vibe that you give off changes too. That much, much less of a approachable vibe in that way, and much more of a don't even think about it vibe, which is my vibe now, because of obviously I'm a much more mature grown up woman at this point. But I feel like that is probably still happening today in places. But I mean, that was like someone who I just did a business deal with, who literally smacked me on the ass. Like, and it wasn't even like the headline for the day. I remember telling my boyfriend at the time, who was like this macho idiot, who was like, I'm going to go talk to him. I'm like, just more sexism. Like, I don't need you to go talk to him. Thanks. Anyway, I digress. Let's get back to the episode, shall we? How do you know if you're an empath with disordered boundaries? Listen, you already know it. So let's just say that. You already know if your boundaries suck or if they're not great or if you really struggle with it. But these are questions that will be for sure like a yes or no. Do you feel guilty saying no, even when you're depleted? You know if that's true for you. You feel relieved when people are happy with you and anxious when they're not happy with you. And don't worry, I'll include these questions in the guide. You over-apologize, or you immediately try to make it better, quote unquote, whatever it is. Or you forget what you want because you're so focused on managing how other people feel. Now, anyone who identifies as being an empath probably said yes to all 4 of those. And what do those things then inspire us to do? Right? When I was at the height of my people-pleasing, I felt guilty saying no, so I rarely did. I was most definitely last on my own list when it came to how I felt. It didn't matter how I felt. If I said I was going to do something, or if somebody needed me to do something, I just said yes, no matter how I felt. And people just come to expect that from you. And so it's almost like, as empaths with bad boundaries, we paint ourselves into a corner of expectation from other people. So how do we make this shift? You need to move from absorbing or merging, right? Absorbing people's feelings, to being more of a witness. So instead of being a sponge, right? Imagine it like you're going to be more like a mirror for people's experience. You can still hold space for people, but without losing yourself in someone else's pain. Because we have to understand that losing ourselves in other people's pain does not help them, and most definitely does not help us. So this is something that for you, I want you to keep it in your mind as you are, interacting with the people in your life who you normally take on their stuff. What would it look like to not? When we're talking about emotional boundaries, I would be remiss to not talk about energetic boundaries as well, because this is a part of that. And I will give you guys a link in the guide for one of my favorite zipping up energy exercises from one of my best friends, Lara Riggio, who is an energy expert. that I use all the time. And it's something that really makes me feel more protected, and not in a paranoid way, just in a healthy way. It's like wearing the right kind of coat. It's cold out and you have on a coat and you're super comfortable. That's what it's like for me when I zip up my energy every day, which I do. It is just as important, right? Energetic boundaries are just as important and essential as emotional and real logistical boundaries. It really does matter. And it's something that you can do. And I'm giving you a link to it and it's free. So what do you have to lose? Just try it. We want to start thinking about putting down what is not ours to carry in life, right? Think about it from the point of view. You can have an affirmation like, this is not mine to carry, or I can care deeply and still say no. Just because I feel it does not mean I am obligated to fix it or that I'm required to fix it. So what are some simple practices that you guys can do to reclaim your emotional sovereignty when you identify as an empath? I think we have to really dial in real time to what we're doing. So it's really asking yourself, am I carrying something that is not mine? Am I carrying something that is not mine? And I think that you can visualize what that is. Visualize yourself putting it down. Because we have to be able to see the new thing that we are creating, right? You have to give yourself permission to pause before responding to anyone who is in emotional distress. And part of this practice of having better emotional boundaries, and again, of course, in Boundary Bootcamp, we cover all the categories of boundaries, but we spend a lot of our time on emotional boundaries because all the people who've gone through the course say that that is their biggest struggle. And I think it probably is because my audience, you guys, are such empaths. Like, this is the actual reality of who you are in this world. And I'm so grateful for you because at least I'm not alone out here in these, streets of the internet by myself. I'm out here with you. So I want you to be able to visualize that you're shifting something. I'm going to give you some questions in the guide that you can answer to have a more clear vision of how are your emotional boundaries and what else can you do. I'll give you a couple of other ideas of what you can do. And I want to hear from you. What do you do to protect your energy, to sort of fill up your own cup? Because this is another thing with being an empath, is that we have to be very mindful of how depleting being with other people can be for us, and then give ourselves permission to not be. I had a client who, she was such an empath, but she also had like this massive career, and she would get to a point of total tank empty. And instead of, because she had terrible boundaries in her personal life, she would literally just book a trip. I would see her on a Thursday and she'd text me on Friday and be like, okay, I went to the Bahamas last night spontaneously. I'm like, oh my, hello? And I was like, wow, Dee, that's the only way you can actually restore is to go to another country, So we don't want that to be the case. And also not all of us can just jump on a plane and go to another country. So we want you to be able to do this, and these are ideas that I'm giving you so that you can do it in your real life. And I think probably one of the most important aspects and takeaways from this episode is that empathy with boundaries is your superpower. And empathy without boundaries is self-erasure or self-abandonment, right? It is not doing the right thing for you. And here's the truth. You can care, and I know that you do. You can love, and I know that you do. You can feel deeply without disappearing yourself in the process, which is what we do when we take on all of these emotions of other people's, and we do it automatically. So what this episode hopefully will be for you is a pause in that automatic response. So if you're ready to stop drowning in other people's emotions and start standing in your own truth, join me in Boundary Bootcamp. I'm so excited. This is where we go deep into all of the skills that empaths and people pleasers need to protect their energy, your own space, and create healthy connections without burnout. Go to boundarybootcamp.com and join us. I hope that you enjoyed this episode of The Terri Cole Show. I hope that I see you in Boundary Bootcamp. It's one of my favorite courses to teach. I hope you have the most amazing week. And as always, take care of you.